YouTube has just now released a new feature called podcasts. Podcast is not a new feature in itself, but YouTube will now support podcast on the YouTube platform. So on our YouTube Studio website, all YouTube creators' YouTube Studio website, there will be a new tab called Podcasts. So let's go to my desktop to see that new feature. We have here the new tab called Podcast. Yes, it's in Swedish here because I am in Sweden and my YouTube Studio is in Swedish. But it will be the same in any language, the same tab here to the right. Here we will now in this video create the first episode of this new YouTube podcast I will create, and we will also do a new pod here by just clicking here. You can also click on create and do a new podcast there. So I will click new podcast. Here I will have a title. I will add a title of the podcast here, and this will be my English podcast. I am planning to do also a Swedish podcast, but I'm not sure if I will publish the Swedish podcast here on my English YouTube channel. I would love to do that because every podcast will be a playlist in itself. So those that don't want to see or listen to my Swedish podcasts can ignore them by just not having to look in that playlist. But the people that want to see my Swedish content could use the Swedish playlist for that podcast. So I'm not sure if I will release a Swedish podcast or not, because I'm afraid that a lot of subscribers should unsubscribe if I do so. But here we should add a title, and this will be for my English podcast. So let's type Svartling uncut raw and personal. That will be my name for my English podcast. And YouTube says that you should not add the word podcast in the title or whatsoever. So it should just be the name of the podcast. Here you should add a description of the podcast. So I have already done a description. So let's take that here. I have this text for my podcast. Let's go back to YouTube Studio and paste that text here, as you can see. This will be my description of my new English podcast. Of course, you can add to this text whenever you want or edit it or whatsoever. Here you can choose if it should be public, private or unlisted. I will choose public at the moment. Here you should add a square thumbnail. You could not use normal YouTube thumbnails. It needs to be squared. So in this field, add a squared thumbnail. Yes, I know that this video will be more video than talking because I show different stuff, but at the same time you can actually listen to this podcast instead of watching it, I hope, because I say exactly what you should do, and that could be also great to have when listening to this podcast, hopefully. But this is just a first episode where I show how to create my own podcast on YouTube. So here you should add a thumbnail. I hope this is the one I did. I've already done one, like so. Maybe the text is quite small, I see. So maybe I will edit this thumbnail later on. I see you can see the undertitle here, subtitle here, uncut, raw and personal. It's too small, but let's click create. So by clicking create, we have now a new podcast on YouTube. As you can see here, we have the thumbnail up here. We have the information that I can edit up here. We have it as public. We also have, it should be sorted by date, newest at the top. So you can choose the oldest at the top, popular at the top, and so on. But I think the newest at the top would be the best for this podcast, so I'm happy with this. Here you can add videos, and you can also add older videos that you already have that you think will fit in this podcast. All the videos you add you should not take different videos from different sources and so on. You should have videos that is in the same genre category as your podcast. You should not add different small clips and so on. You should only have long form videos here in the same podcast. If you will not do that, then YouTube will not classify this playlist as a podcast. But if YouTube do that, then this podcast will actually be available in audio only form at YouTube Music later on. That will be really nice to see how good that works, because YouTube Music has a lot of millions of subscribers, and you will have revenue from audio only ads from YouTube Music, from your own podcast. And here at YouTube, where video is the most important, this podcast, this playlist with my podcast episodes will be categorized as podcasts. So when people search for it, both on Google and in YouTube, it will show up as a podcast. It will be marked with a tag, podcast, and will clearly be marked as a podcast. That's really nice. And in the future, when we have added a lot of videos, you also will have statistics, analytics for the podcast and every video. Exactly the same as with all other videos. That's really nice. So, and you of course get revenue from ads, from video ads, exactly as normal videos. So, if we go back to the podcast tab, as you can see here, you have one podcast available here. So every time I will add a video to this playlist, this podcast, then I just click on the podcast like so and go to videos and then upload videos, or choose from already videos on your channel. So you can upload videos or choose videos that you already have on your channel, if you know what I mean. And this podcast is, as you saw my name, uncut, raw and personal. It's meant to be uncut videos, very raw. I speaking exactly what I feel, my opinions of different stuff, and also some personal stuff, and also from life stuff I do in my life and so on. So this will be quite interesting project, I think. So if we go back to my face cam here so we can talk, this will be my new project on YouTube. Of course, I will still do different videos as normal, show stuff, how to do stuff and so on. But this will be me talking more about different topics and my opinions in a raw form and personal form, and very uncut with maybe some errors when recording, because English is not my native language, so I will do probably a lot of errors when talking. Before, I have done a lot of editing to edit out all the takes where I do something wrong. It takes a lot of minutes and hours to do that with every video, but in this podcast section, uncut, raw and personal, I will not edit out so much. Maybe some huge fault and retakes, maybe I will edit out those, but a lot of stuff will be left, and not so tight cuts. You will see me more personal and my opinions, as I said. But it would be cool if you could in the comments say what you think about maybe if I start a Swedish podcast on this English YouTube channel too. Will you unsubscribe if I do some videos from time to time in Swedish that will only be available in a specific podcast playlist for Swedish videos? They will not be in the way for you that don't speak Swedish, so I will only have them in that place and nowhere else. Will that make you unsubscribe? If so, I would like you to make a comment down below and say that you will definitely unsubscribe if I do some Swedish videos from time to time. So please make a comment if that is something that bothers you, because I am very afraid to lose subscribers if I do Swedish videos from time to time. But I think if you have that in a separate playlist, a podcast only for Swedish videos, this podcast we created now will not be for Swedish. It will be my English talking videos. But as I said, I can add one more for Swedish talking. So hopefully you will not unsubscribe if I do that, because this channel is already monetized. I have been for many years, so I will use that channel hopefully for also a Swedish podcast. If I should use my other YouTube channel I have that is not going anywhere, I have very few subscribers there, then it will be quite impossible for me to monetize my Swedish videos, I think, because I don't think that I will ever get 1,000 followers on my other channel for Swedish videos, sadly. So I would really like to do videos here even for Swedish videos. So hopefully you can accept that. But I'm very afraid to lose subscribers if I do that. I don't want to do that. So hopefully you can accept that. So this YouTube feature is brand new. I did a search on YouTube recently and not many have done a video about that new feature. So it's quite cool to be one of the first doing a video about the new YouTube podcast feature. This feature will be huge, I think. It will also be a website called youtube.com/podcast available, where you can see all the YouTube podcast that is classified as podcast in the future. But at the moment, you can only see that if you are in the US. So here in Sweden, that page doesn't exist. I can show you that by going to my desktop again, and then we do another youtube.com podcasts. As you see here now, that page doesn't exist from Sweden where I live, so I can't find that. But the people that lives in the US can already now find a lot of podcasts that is already classified as podcasts on the YouTube platform. So that will be quite interesting if that feature will also come from all other countries and languages, hopefully also here in Sweden after a while. But I will already now upload this video as my first episode of my new YouTube podcast, Svartling Uncut, Raw and Personal. So this will be the first episode, and it will be kind of cool to be one of the first, actually. Maybe one of the first in Sweden too, to upload a real podcast to YouTube's new podcast feature on YouTube. The episodes in this podcast I have created in this video will be around 10 to 30 minutes long, hopefully. That is what I will have as a goal, at least. So sometimes maybe it can be hard to talk as long, I don't know, about just one topic. So maybe I will talk about different topics in coming episodes of this podcast. So that will be one interesting thing to try out too, to see how long every episode can be and which topics I should be in the same episode. So, but I think this could be a nice first episode. So let's quit this episode, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel. And maybe in the future you can only just subscribe to a podcast if you prefer to just subscribe to those videos. Hopefully you can do that in the future. Okay, bye.